Thank you very much, and delighted to be here. Let me just make sure we can get the presentation on the screen and everyone can see it. Okay, so absolutely delighted to be here and talk through some of the insights we've been seeing from Coursera's perspective, particularly in relation to a big program we've launched working with universities around the world and how we help organizations get online over the last of a couple of months. And so to put this into context, we're going to go through a little bit about the background that we're seeing at the moment, some of the insights that we've had from our specific response to the coronavirus crisis, and then what we're also seeing the universities we've engaged with, their thoughts about how things are going to evolve in the next academic year, how you actually work with online providers like Coursera, and the ecosystem that we work with. And then hopefully we'll have a time for a few questions at the end. If you look at the state of the world that we find ourselves in, the impact clearly, as all of you will know, has been very, very unprecedented. Pretty much every university has been impacted in some way, with over 1 billion people impacted across almost every country. And that's resulted in almost every organization having to figure out how to move from in most cases, a predominantly on-campus educational process into something that's virtually 100% online. And that's been a huge, huge challenge for many organizations to work at how to do that effectively, both in the short term, but also sort of looking longer term as to how that can actually go through. And there's also a lot of uncertainty around students about how that's going to impact them going forward. So we see that like 1 in 5 students, potential students, now believe they won't be able to attend college because of the COVID-19 outbreak. And that attendance question mark is not just, will I be able to physically go there, or will I not have any funding? It's a whole range of questions around, will I be able to travel, or will I even want to travel, even if it's allowed to take place? Can I still afford to attend the university that I was originally planning to go towards? Have my family circumstances been changed? Do I now need to learn in a way that's perhaps structured more around having to work and having something that's perhaps more of a part-time than a kind of full-time engagement? Will there be more flexibility in how I learn than perhaps previously anticipated? And the expectation here is that we as Coursera have basically provided access to all universities, access to the catalog from Coursera free of charge. And those courses are made available. They're primarily being originated by our university partners. We have about 170 university partners that provide content across business and technology and data science and a whole range of different disciplines. And they're available to all universities around the world free of charge until the end of July. And individuals who have started a course before the end of July are then able to go on and complete that course, as long as they complete it by the end of September. And the intention here is to have given universities a bit of breathing room to figure out their longer term strategy and to get something online quickly. And we've had a huge amount of interest and demand from this program. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the insights we've had as a result of that. So we've had a huge amount of inquiries related to this. We've had over 95,000 inquiries from 170 countries around the world. Some of those, of course, include students, but there's about 26,000 colleges and universities have inquired about the program. And to date, we've set up almost 5,000 programs on the platform across about 2,500 actual unique institutions across the business. And to date, we've had over 1 million learning hours have been conducted on that platform. And we're seeing on average about 3 courses have been done per learner, which, given that the program has really only been running live for most individuals for about a month, and in many cases, perhaps will only come live in the last week or 2, we're seeing already huge appetite for accessing learning through this system. So you can see some of the data here and the level of interest in this program. In many cases, our university partners are still trying to obviously get this up into scale and get as many individual learners onto the program. So we still think a lot of this data is very early days. I'm going to see huge continued growth on some of this data as we go forward. But we're probably connected with something like 10% of all universities around the world. So we have a pretty large data set now in terms of the kind of insights that we're seeing running across this platform. And what we're seeing is that this is data that we've seen across the entire Coursera ecosystem, across both our consumer platforms and our business platforms, as well as our university partners. You can kind of see the jump that we're now seeing in terms of people accessing content. All these curves sort of look like the same, but the scales are slightly different. So some run up to sort of 7 times growth, some 5 times growth, some 3 times growth, etc. But we're seeing the same kind of hockey stick effect across all of the regions that we're operating in. And that has been a very, very significant increase in demand for online access to learning, which is perhaps not surprising given the circumstances we find ourselves in, but the level of growth we're seeing is certainly unprecedented for us as a business. And there's some really interesting dynamics that are coming out of that. We're seeing that there's interest across pretty much all domains that we have, but there's definitely some big correlations around things such as personal development, wellness, reskilling, how we work effectively at home, information around COVID, etc., that have kind of come out. And there's some direct correlations between how severe a lockdown is as to the significant explosion in growth and learning, particularly where people are perhaps otherwise not as productive as they were able to be previously. And a couple of examples of courses. So we have a very widely regarded and popular course on the platform called The Science of Wellbeing. That specific course has had over 1.5 million enrollments already in 2020. And it's a course that's very much focused on well-being, figuring out how to be happy. And there's been live versions of this that run looking at resilience and how to actually deal with the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Imperial College of London has produced a course that gets updated regularly. And it's very much about looking at the science behind COVID and really helping people understand how these things actually work and how they spread and the kind of the real detail behind this. And that's been the most popular course we've had on the entire platform in 2020, with already 95,000 new enrollments started this year. And so we're seeing some really interesting shifts in the kind of demand dynamics of what people are interested now in learning about. And there's some broad themes that are coming out from the organizations that we're working with. So firstly, there's a really critical focus for organizations about how we're going to attract remote and international students and even local students to universities, to the organization. And there's obviously some pressing concerns that go around that. There's a general expectation that even if everybody emerges from lockdown, that the likelihood that people will still want to travel or travel internationally will be severely reduced. And so the way in which international students will have to be engaged will almost certainly have to be some form of blended learning or remote-based learning. And there's an expectation that there will be a much more significant requirement for flexibility in how that learning is done. So a combination of potentially virtual live learning, perhaps with Zoom rooms or face-to-face time over video, but also a whole set of learning which is able to do for a student at their own time. And there's also, I think, a much bigger focus than ever before in ensuring that learning programs provided by universities, whether degrees or otherwise, are really providing in-demand job skills so that university students are coming out with the skill sets that employers are looking for to increase their employability outcomes. And that's been exacerbated given the fact that we're anticipating entering a global recession. The job markets are much more challenging for many individuals. There's a lot more people now looking for roles that currently aren't in work. And so there's certainly a increased sense of concern from students about their ability to find work quickly once they exit a university program, and to make sure that they're as best prepared as possible. So a lot of the universities we're now working with are tailoring many of their degree programs to ensure that there are certain skills that are being taught almost irrespective of the subject. And skills around kind of agile working and some sort of basic data literacy skills, awareness, critical thinking skills, entrepreneurial, emotional intelligence, etc., are skills that many organizations are looking for and are built into those programs, whether it's a science program, whether it's an arts degree, whatever it might be. And clearly there's going to have to be an evolution in how organizations are measuring and assessing student achievement, because it's simply not viable to have in-person assessments. And so many of the courses that are available on the Coursera platform have assessments that have been built by the originators of that content, by those university partners. But also organizations are looking to build their own versions of online assessments and make sure that there are mechanisms in place to try and avoid plagiarism and make sure that everything is the right person completing those assessments, but finding different ways in which to actually evaluate achievement and performance through those programs. And there's also a level of assurance that has to be done for students that, first of all, there's been a lot of historical reticence about delivering programs online or in a virtual setting because there's been a perception that the quality won't be there, the experience will be poor, there'll be a lack of engagement, and there'll be a real challenge in delivering a kind of positive experience to the student. And what we've actually seen is that there's been a lot of positive feedback to these programs. There's been a lot of really strong and positive recognition to the universities that have moved quickly and effectively to offer something, given that they've had to react so quickly with the challenges that they have. But secondly, that actually a lot of this content that is available can be delivered online is actually of exceptionally high quality, and the engagement experience has been really positive. And there's been an opportunity also to shift some of the dynamics of those programs to really make sure, as I said before, that there's a higher propensity for a job outcome to come from those programs. And the final piece of this that we're seeing as a general theme emerging is that organizations are trying to figure out, like, how do they remain resilient after this current crisis is over? Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, whether there'll be further waves of this particular virus that we've seen happening, but there's an expectation now that there's going to be other problems we will face in the world as we go forward. There's a recognition we will have other crises, and whatever they may be, there's a high likelihood that we'll have to deal with circumstances where people can't attend campus, that will need flexibility, that will have to offer programs that are online and much more perhaps modern than we perhaps had before. And so we've seen a number of organizations do some really interesting engagements to try and address this, who have been pretty fast to adapt. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of those as we talk now. So the first one of these is with Duke Kunshan. So Duke University in the US has basically an environment in Wuhan, which is caused first hit by the coronavirus outbreak. And they recognized that something would have to be done very quickly. And so they managed to implement a solution in just sort of 5 days, which started in February, midway through their semester 3, and recognizing that a lot of the students that they have to connect with were very distributed around the space they were trying to work with. And they literally had 3 weeks before the next session started, with a recognition that they wanted to be able to go 100% online by that time frame. And so they moved very quickly. They utilized Coursera and a range of other tools to help offer something to all their students in Wuhan, which was 100% online from the start of semester 4. And they were very clear that communication was a massive part of this. So they produced facts, and they had webinars that were running, and a daily newsletter to update people, a lot of information on their website to really help people figure out what was taking place, the changes that would happen, and how that would be managed. And they've seen a lot of benefit that's come from that immediately. First of all, they've seen a lot of self-motivated learning taking place. So when people are stuck in isolation and waiting and looking for something to do, learning is a very powerful force for good. It's something that not only gives people something to focus on and something to actually do, it actually really helps generate a positive sense of well-being and a real sense of hope, because you're investing in yourself. You're generating skill sets that will give yourself better opportunities when you come out the other side of the crisis. And it's very much just in time. It's a learning that can be done at the time a student is in a position to engage, as they need it, when they need it, with a huge range of courses to choose from, so you can align with lots and lots of different interests that will come from those programs. And so semester 4, there was then run at 100% online. And they've also built a lot of additional tools that lay above the basic Coursera offering, adding in capabilities such as sort of Zoom hours, and additional projects, new forms of assessments that are built specifically for their online audience. And this was a hugely effective project where they got very, very rapid adoption from the students themselves. Another example of a university that had already been very active in moving into a kind of a blended learning model before this crisis even hit, but then accelerated in response to this, was the University of Szeged in Hungary. And this is an organization that certainly prior to 2017 had been very focused on having a distance learning type offering, as well, of course, of its natural on-campus solutions. But more recently, it's been moving into a much more blended focus to learning. And they conducted a large-scale student survey, and the feedback from that was that students really prefer to have much more interactive methods, much more flexibility about how they learn. There was a real desire to have practical, work-orientated skills to come out of the programs, whichever programs they wanted to deal with. And actually, there was a really positive engagement with modern technologies, using online, using video, using e-learning as part of those programs. And of course, the final part of that, and many of those students would have to have part-time jobs, which meant that full-time campus engagement wasn't really an option for themselves. And they had to actually find more flexible ways of engaging for learning. Now, the University of Szeged has about 21,000 students. 4,000 of those are international, and they come from more than 100 countries around the world. So the international contingent is a pretty challenging set of individuals to manage, all of which could have very different circumstances given the current environment. And they have about 2,200 teachers and researchers trying to offer those learning programs out with about 14,000 courses. And so to shift that huge catalog into an online scenario is no small challenge. But their fundamental goal is to include Coursera for everybody during 2020. They've already made some very interesting first steps towards that. They've made use of the free program that we have from Coursera, as well as supplementing with additional licenses that they own themselves, and also translating some of the content on the platform. They translated Learning How to Learn, which is perhaps one of the most widely known courses on the platform, into Hungarian, which was hugely appreciated and generated a lot of positive brand impact in Hungary. And their focus is very much around not just offering a blended program for their university students that helps ensure that they'll be ready for the workforce of tomorrow, that has flexibility in it, that embraces both forms of online and the normal kind of face-to-face engagement that you might have, but also looking at how we're going to retrain people who are going to become unemployed as part of this crisis within Hungary. How do we actually reach out to adult education? How do we develop IT skills across a wider population as possible, which are core to many of the roles that we have today? And of course, by doing this effectively in terms of outcomes, there should be an increase in student numbers and ability to thrive in this new environment that we have to face today. Now, if you look at things from Coursera's perspective and how we try and work with individuals, Coursera has a very, very large database of users at the moment. We have a little bit over 55 million people who are registered on our platform today who learn. And that's across all forms of organizations. It's across governments, it's across individual learners who have just come on to our consumer platform, many of whom can access content for free and really are only paying if they want a certificate to prove the actual work that they've done. We work with over 170 university partners today, but also 39 industry partners, organizations like Google and IBM and Amazon, who will provide business-specific content relative to their expertise. And we work with more than 2,300 business and government organizations across the globe. And what that really gives us is a real insight into what are the skill sets that organizations are looking for, that universities can help incorporate into their programs to ensure that when their students come out, that the employer relationships and the networks that they work with are much more likely to take their students on because they have the skills that companies are already focused on retraining their employees to do, and making sure that they're as relevant as possible to the current marketplace. And it also provides a very strong feedback loop to our university partners is what are the skills that are in demand? What is the learning that people are looking to achieve? What are all the people individually, what are they trying to reskill to do in recognition of their specific personal environments? And the catalog that we have is very broad ranging. It has a huge range of business courses, a lot of in-depth technology, a huge focus on data science, but we also have health, social science, arts and humanity courses, etc. And across those 4,000 courses, there's probably 140,000 or more lecture videos and more than 240,000 assessments. And these are in-depth courses. They take individuals anywhere from sort of foundational learning through to intermediate capabilities to sort of mastery level content. And a typical course can be 15, 20 hours in length and will include a combination of video, tutorial information and lectures, reading materials, specific assessments, and effectively you'll have the ability then to complete that course by passing those assessments as you go through. Some of those are automated, some of those are peer assessments, but it's a very engaging mechanism to learn. And of course, the content has been developed by universities around the world, many of whom have got very, very high rankings and very highly respected and have all the kind of pedagogical learning principles at play in how you actually engage people with learning and make sure that the learning outcomes are achieved. We've also just launched a program which I think will help a lot of universities very quickly move into an online program with something like Coursera, which we call Course Match. And where we've been able to do so, where there are publicly displayed programs which say the complete degree programs that university has and what they involve in the lessons, we've been able to take those and load them into Course Match. And so as a university in the US, for example, or in India, you can go in and simply put in your university name and Course Match will tell you which are the top 5 courses that most strongly correlate with the learning program that you have and with each of the learning programs that you have. So you don't have to figure out what's the relevant content. You can literally take the catalog, have the alignment pre-calculated for you, and then apply it to your organization. Now, if your university isn't on Course Match today, and many of them aren't across EMEA, across Europe, because of the different mechanisms that we have in actually getting that information available, then you can simply send a spreadsheet, a comma delimited file to us, and we'll put it into Course Match, and we will then put out to you the kind of content that you would need to actually deliver your programs online and to do so very, very effectively. And you can then link that with the free program that's available to universities today, which again, as I said, will hopefully give people time to think about how they then move into something perhaps a little bit more permanent once we go into the sort of September entry period. Now, the courses that we have, as I said, there's a big focus on teaching job-relevant skills as well as the more standard content you would find across university programs. And we divide those broadly into 3 categories: business skills, which cover everything from leadership and governance to more specific things in different functional domains; technology skills, which cover everything from computer programming to data science and so on; and a very specific set of data skills. There's a huge demand for skills around data scientists, around interpretation of data, machine learning, and so on, that we see across almost every organization today, and there simply aren't enough people in the world to fulfill all that demand. And so university students who are coming out with those skill sets will immediately find themselves much more highly employable. And we find a lot of the university students are now asking to ensure that they have these skill sets built into their programs. When you complete any course in Coursera, you also get a certificate. Now, some of those certificates are what we would call professional certificates from recognized organizations like Google, which will give you a certification that's recognized in the industry and has a real world external value, really helps you showcase your expertise. We have other certificates which are simply a completion certificate, which many students will then post on their LinkedIn profiles to show the kind of work that they've done. A lot of the universities we work with will utilize this content as part of their overall degree program and allocate it specifically for credit. with the intention that there are other value benefits outside of just finding a way to engage with students from an online perspective, but by utilizing world-class content from partners around the world, particularly in areas where it may not be the natural strength of the university, there's an opportunity to improve the skill sets of the academic staff, but also to improve global rankings by actually improving outcomes and improving the kind of quality and range and depth of the courses that you offer. And actually also enabling yourself to do more with your fixed costs, because you can allocate some of the content of your degree programs away from your teachers into the online programs, allowing you to do more value generating activities, or to be able to manage more students without having to alter your fixed cost base. But the key thing, of course, we're seeing at the moment with the COVID crisis is just managing that online access. And so what we've found is that there's been a degree of effectively forced experimentation that's been taking place across the university ecosystem, where many organizations may have had some plans to move online and may have some plans to go blended, but probably not at this speed, at this pace, and at this time. And some just really weren't looking at this at all, certainly within this year or even next. And so there's had to become a shift to actually make that happen very, very fast. And so I think what we're seeing now is an acceleration of a natural evolution that would have, under other circumstances, taken a lot longer to manifest. But now it's happening right now. It's happening immediately. It's happening across almost every country and every institution, going to an almost 100% online program. And I think that will engender some permanent changes as we go forward. I don't think any organization realistically, incredibly expects that it will just go back to the way it was before, with an on-campus offering and everything being done face-to-face. There's a recognition now that there's an element of online and flexibility and different ways of engaging. It's going to be a permanent adaptation. And I think for many of the universities we work with, the feedback we're hearing from them is the decisions that they make now, the decisions that they're thinking about in terms of how to engage with students, particularly over the next academic year, will have very long-term ramifications for the university, for its brand, for its reputation, for the ability to attract international students into those programs. And there's both a positive and negative connotation of that. Getting that right has an opportunity to really accelerate the perception of being an innovative and leading university and adapting very quickly to these times. Whereas not offering that flexibility means there's a real risk that some students will be lost, and that could take a long time to rebuild that level of students coming into the organization. So I'm going to turn off the slide share at this point. Phil, I'm not sure, especially with me disappearing for a few minutes, how much time we still have on the agenda for questions. So let me know if you want me to field a couple, or you want to try and get back on track.
Let me just give you one quick one. We are a little bit over, and I think we've got a couple of people waiting for the next session. But I mean, just reflecting on that final set of remarks you made about how permanent this change may be, the forced experiment. I mean, we obviously heard a few years ago this really big hype around the potential of MOOCs and open access remote courses to completely revolutionize the university offer. I mean, do you feel that this is now the moment of remote learning in terms of genuinely shaking up permanently the kind of core business model of universities, you know, the very expensive face-to-face on-campus traditional types of delivery? There's obviously going to be way more economic pressure on families, on individuals, way more competition between universities to attract students when international mobility has changed so much. Do you think this is a potentially pivotal moment for the sector where the entire business model gets threatened?
I definitely do believe that this is an inflection point. It's definitely a point of change, and we will see things coming through that wouldn't have otherwise happened but for this crisis that we find ourselves in now. I think some of the hype about MOOCs, both negative and positive, you know, was vastly overinflated. Like, it was never realistic that it would completely transform the world, nor was it likely they would just suddenly all die a death and disappear. I think there was always going to be a middle ground. And we've certainly, and universities have been around for a very long time. It's not as a organizational global kind of structure something that is typically moved incredibly fast and adapted rapid changing technology. And so we're seeing some accelerations of those things. But I definitely do believe that there is going to be a level of remote learning that's now going to be built in that has been certainly accelerated. It was starting to happen. We saw lots of our partners. We have probably 100 universities before this crisis even started had already embraced forms of remote learning, and many, many more were coming through. That's probably going to have a tenfold increase, if not more than that, in response to this crisis because of the dynamics that changed. And it's pretty impossible to see how you cannot embrace it for at least the next year or two, because the impact of this crisis is not going to be 2 months. It's going to be the next couple of years. It's going to be a long recovery period and a long change in people's concerns about travel and flexibility and how they interact. The other piece, I think, is there's been a long resistance to this from many universities, and many teaching staff have been uncomfortable, haven't had the skill sets, the comfort. It's not what they've done for 20, 30 years. And there's a natural human resistance to change. And there's been an expectation that trying to embrace it will just be such a poor experience. But the evidence has shown that isn't the case. The evidence has shown there's actually been very positive engagement from students around the world. And I think it's dispelled a lot of the myths and concerns whether this is actually a viable way to go forward. Now, I also don't ever suspect it'll ever be 100% online and completely remote. I think there's always going to be a huge value that universities can bring with face-to-face engagement, whether that's on campus or through video conference, other means, live interactions, working groups, collaboration, etc. All of those things are an essential part of the educational structure. And I do also believe that universities have, if anything, a more important and growing role going forward. Lifelong learning is becoming more and more true as a proposition. The business partners that we work with are seeing this, and they're engaging more strongly with universities and university content. And they're also looking for support during this crisis as how we actually reskill globally. And the universities have an opportunity to play a major, major role in that. And I think it's those that embrace the change will be the ones that I think will see the shifts in your rankings over the next couple of years, with the ones that have truly found a way to adapt to these kind of permanent changes we're going to see.